Welcome to Holy Health, the podcast where cutting-edge health insights meet timeless biblical wisdom. Join us as we explore the latest in wellness, fitness, and mental health, all while grounding our journey in the spiritual truths and guidance found in the Torah. Whether you're looking to nourish your body, mind, or soul, we'll help you live a life of balance, vitality, and faith. Tune in to discover how to achieve holistic health through the perfect blend of modern science and ancient wisdom. Let's dive into the fullness of life, body, and spirit together. Hey guys, welcome back to the Holy Health podcast. I'm really excited about today's guests, today's topic of histamines. Everybody's heard about histamine. I know everybody's heard about taking antihistamine. Most people have probably taken one at least once in their life. Anybody who has severe allergies knows that they don't want to be very far from antihistamines because it helps them during allergy season or during a severe allergy attack. And I feel like not enough is known. And I got to today's topic through a listener who's also a friend of mine who felt that she might be suffering from some type of histamine intolerance. So today's guest is going to talk to us all about histamine, about what it is it good for us? Is it not good for us? Is there too much of a good thing? What's the difference between histamine intolerance versus histamine overload? And everything you ever didn't even know that you wanted to know about histamine. So our guest today is Jennifer Fugo. Jennifer is a functional clinical nutritionist. She is the founder of Skin Interrupt and the host of the Healthy Skin Show. Jennifer received her master's in human nutrition from the University of Bridgeport and her bachelor's from New School University. She's a member of the American Nutrition Association, an advisory board member for the Nutritional Aesthetic Alliance, and a faculty member of Lauren Skin. In her clinical practice, she helps women and men with never-ending stomach problems, chronic skin rashes, brain fog, chronic fatigue, and autoimmunity find a way back to their best health. Jennifer listens to her clients and looks for missed or dismissed clues that ultimately point towards the root causes that underlie their nagging physical symptoms. Jennifer also has extensive experience supporting people with various food sensitivities, especially those who are stuck on elimination diets without any improvement. As a sought-after expert, advocate, and speaker, Jennifer's been featured on Dr. Oz, Yahoo News, CNN, Paleo Magazine, and Philadelphia Magazine. She's the author behind the best-selling book, The Savvy Gluten-Free Shopper, How to Eat Healthy Without Breaking the Bank, and creator of the Eczema and Psoriasis Awareness Weeks. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear what she has to say. She was really a pleasure to have on as a guest. She's a lot of fun. And just like we do every week, we have a special guest who is going to help us I'm going to say it's not so much about histamine intolerance, but really kind of how does histamine and what histamine actually is, how does that fit into Torah? So we have back for, I don't know, probably the fifth or sixth time, we have back my friend Edan Green. Edan is a Torah educator who works in an elementary school in Efrat, and she also teaches in various Torah learning programs. You can find her on Instagram at Soulful Media. And of course, I will have links to both Jennifer and Edan in the show notes as well. And keep your ideas coming. Thanks to a couple of you, I've booked some exciting guests for the upcoming weeks. And as I say almost every week, if you are someone who loves Torah and you want to come on as a Torah expert, I'd love to have you. Or if you are someone who feels you have something in some form of health to offer this audience, we'd love to hear from you as well. And keep clicking those follow buttons. A lot of you listen every week because there are a lot of you that I send the link to in a WhatsApp broadcast. And if you're somebody who wants to get sent the link every week, please feel free to reach out to me and I will add you to that WhatsApp broadcast. But a lot of you never actually click through and follow on either Spotify or Apple, or we're really trying to push the YouTube channel as well now, though most people still listen without watching. You can watch us in full color video as well. The video quality is getting better now that we're here on Riverside. But any or all of those podcast platforms and even a few smaller ones that I did not mention, please feel free to follow us, to add a comment. All of those things help the algorithm. And some of you have been liking and actually putting comments on the YouTube as well. And again, that really helps trigger the algorithm. Hopefully, this episode we won't have a problem with. As I said a few weeks ago, our episode on nicotine was taken down by YouTube after 7 days with 1,700 views due to medical misinformation. So if you don't think that we are being censored, not just me, all of you, if you don't think that a lot of the information you're getting through regular news sources is censored, you really do need to think again, because the censoring actually is real. Luckily, you can still listen to that episode if you haven't on Apple or Spotify or any of these other various platforms as well. So keep listening, keep coming at me with your ideas, and even more, I thank you guys for listening. I thank you guys. Every week the show's been growing. I thank you for helping me get this word out. Shabbat Shalom, and enjoy the show. Hi, Jennifer. I am so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I just want to let you know that I got to you because ChatGPT told me that you would be the best person to interview on today's topic.
Gosh, well, thank you to ChatGPT. I did not know that it knew who I was, so I guess it does.
It's a little crazy, right? It's become really become like a friend, but yeah.
There's
So
some bad things, as it would
exactly. I think it's like everything in this life, you've got to find the good and separate the good from the bad.
It is.
So we are here today to talk about histamine intolerance.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm probably going to go a little backwards in that I'm sure there's a story how you got involved with this. But before we get there, I just want to know, could you tell people, first of all, what histamine is so that we could maybe understand what we're actually talking about?
Sure. So histamine is a naturally produced neurotransmitter in the human body. Basically, what that means is it's a chemical that serves very specific and important purposes. So I think it's important, even though we're talking about histamine intolerance, to not demonize it and say, oh, histamine is bad. It's not inherently bad. That's actually not the problem. So because I think as we get into this, you'll see why not demonizing it is important, because the thing that's keeping you and I both awake right now is histamine. So it's not inherently a bad thing. It's important for us to be alive and awake and functioning human beings. So histamine is also something that can come from the outside world. So, for example, there are certain organisms that'll produce histamine. We can have histamine increase in food, especially the longer it sits after being cooked. So like leftovers, for example, if they sat for 3 days after being cooked, even in the refrigerator, they're still going to increase in the amount of histamine that is in the food. You'll also have histamine release in the body because we have certain types of cells, one most notably called mast cells, and that's M-A-S-T as in Tom for anybody who wants to look that up. Mast cells are like little, I liken them to like little warehouses, and the warehouses have all these little packets of little boxes everywhere, and those contain histamine. And when they become destabilized, the cells will release histamine into the body. And so most people know and understand histamine if, say, you have like an allergy, like seasonal allergies, and all of a sudden somebody blows some pollen in your face, or it's super windy and there's pollen all over your car, what happens to us in the springtime here in the northeast of the US. And you're sneezing, you feel congested, your nose is running, your eyes are running, your throat's itchy. That's what we generally know of as histamine. But it is a really important chemical in the body. So again, let's not demonize it as we go through this conversation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That was a great explanation. And so today there's this big talk, and I'm hearing more and more people speak about this, of something called histamine intolerance. Mm-hmm. So if histamine is something that we need in our bodies, if it's keeping us awake, how can people be intolerant, not be able to tolerate it? So what is histamine intolerance?
Yeah. So histamine intolerance So there's two different things. And I think we have to talk about both to really give a good service to like what the actual problem is. So histamine intolerance implies that for whatever reason, and usually it's genetic, we cannot break histamine down. So chemicals and different things have to be broken down. A lot of people understand lactose intolerance. So the term intolerance implies that either the enzyme that would break something down is not functioning optimally due to genetic reasons, like a genetic SNP, or their body just doesn't produce enough of that enzyme to actually break things down, which usually is the case with somebody who is lactose intolerant, right? So they don't have enough lactase to break lactose in dairy down. So the same goes for histamine. When we say histamine intolerance, it's specifically implying that one of the two enzymes that breaks histamine down is not able to do its job appropriately. So there's the two different enzymes are located in different parts. One is in the gut, so in the GI tract. And that's a really important one to know about here, is called diamine oxidase, or DAO. That's supposed to break down histamine that we consume through food, that could come from organisms, which we can talk about, but any histamine inside the gut, which is technically outside of our body, but again, it's in the gut. Now, in the cells, so intracellularly, we have another enzyme called HMNT, and that breaks down histamine in the cells. So if you have a true histamine intolerance, it implies that one of or both of those enzymes is, we'll just put it in air quotes, like faulty, so to speak, like, right? Could be a genetic SNP. So it's not something generally where suddenly at 40 years old, you were fine the entire time of your life. You could break down histamine. You could eat fermented foods. You could do, go out when the pollen was high. You could be around the dog, all this stuff. You were fine. And then suddenly like a switch flipped, and now you can't be around any of it. And you're having these quote unquote histamine intolerance symptoms all the time. That's not a genetic issue, right? Because we don't just change our genetic code suddenly. The genes you get are the genes you have. Now, yes, there's some issues with, like, if we went down the autoimmune route, okay, sure, we can have these genes turn on and off, but that's not what's going on here. There's one gene that codes for DAO, right? So it is what it is. So then what's the problem?
A light bulb's going off in my head right now.
Is histamine intolerance actually the problem that we should worry about? And I would argue no. And so the other thing that I was talking about is this other problem with histamine, which I call histamine overload, which means that there is so much flooding in the system of histamine that the enzymes that normally work, and they are working, they can't keep up. So it doesn't matter how much you're like, oh, I'm going to cut, fermented foods and high histamine foods and protein powder and even leftovers in some instances out of my diet. I'm still having all these reactions. And the question is why? And so to me, histamine overload implies that the cup, like if we have a cup, right? Your burden of histamine is already so high that it does not take much to spill over, essentially, and you're just like a histamine mess. So to me, we worry about histamine intolerance when in reality, I would say that 100% of the clients that I've worked with who have skin and the gut and other like neurological impacts that show up because of histamine intolerance, none of them have histamine intolerance. They have histamine overload. And histamine overload is something you can do something about. If you have a true histamine intolerance, you're pretty much limited to restricting your diet of high histamine foods and taking the DAO enzyme in a supplemental form. And if you've tried that and that does not work, you have histamine overload. And that's where you got to start digging in.
Okay, so this brings up so many more questions for me, and light bulbs are going off all over. Because obviously, first of all, you said the DAO is in your gut. So it's almost as if the people who think they have histamine intolerance actually have histamine overload. And most of the ones that are coming to you actually don't have, their gut is so unhealthy. Like, let's first not throw out the histamine foods. we will talk about what they are, I'm sure, soon, because a lot of people don't know. We will get there, but a lot of them are foods that are actually healthy. And first, get rid of the processed garbage that none of us should be eating anyway, because that's causing everybody's insulin resistance as well. It
It
basically
causes so
sounds
many
like it
problems.
goes, what? Yeah,
It
exactly.
causes so many problems and so many issues systemically. We like to think like, oh, the food that I'm eating has no impact or bearing on anything else, and we are one being. It's nice to compartmentalize, which is really great at what our conventional medical system has done, but the truth is that you can't separate your GI tract or your immune system and whatnot from like your nervous system. It's all we're all one.
Okay, well, I'm going to pose something to you. I told you offline before we got on, and I would say her name because a lot of, I mean, not a lot, but some of the people who listen do know who she is, and I don't think she would care, but some of you will know who I'm describing. But it was my friend who actually said, please, please, please do an episode on histamine intolerance. When I tell you that this person, I've known her now for 15 years, she is one of the thinnest people you've ever met. She is a person who says she loves to eat, but actually does not care. She cares more about how she feels than what she eats. And she's always, really her whole life, since a teenager, she's had issues with her gut. She's had issues, I don't know, a whole bunch of different health issues. So she's always done, when I tell you she's done every type of getting rid of anything. This is somebody who eats so clean, nothing packaged. She knows she's allergic to onions, to garlic, to nuts, to like all of these things. So she doesn't eat any of them. If you tell her she can't eat bread, she won't eat bread. Like she literally is somebody. So really probably she needs to actually call you to, for you to actually ask for more time. But she was the one who really felt like maybe it's histamine intolerance. Now, maybe in her case it really is because like we said, you said that if you're really histamine intolerant, you'd be born with histamine intolerance. Now, I did an episode on DNA with Kashif Khan of the DNA company, and I had a DNA test. So I actually know that my DNA says that I might have issues. I'm not going to say it said histamine intolerance. I would have to look back, but I think it said I don't break down histamine the most optimally
Efficiently. Right.
or efficiently. And interesting enough, this same person who told me to do this interview with you will remember because we were biking friends. We used to always bike together. And it was the biggest joke among the four of us that would bike together that you didn't want to be anywhere near me because I always had what I like to call exercise induced runny nose. So when we would be biking, I would be like blowing, it's disgusting, I know, I'm sorry, but I'd be like blowing my nose so you didn't want to be behind me because
Yeah.
you could get it. Now, I don't have that anymore because I eat much, 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 much cleaner than I used to 10 years ago. But actually now I don't get that exercise induced runny nose anymore.
Can I ask you, Dara, does your friend, when you said, because I think this is also important because, so one of my grievances with the wellness world,
Uh-huh.
and so I'm including and lumping in like the integrative and functional medicine is I think
Uh-huh.
sometimes we've allowed terms that are very specific to mean too broad of a thing. So when you said she's allergic to onions, garlic, nuts, do you mean she's like an IgE allergy to those things, or she seems to be like to struggle with symptoms when she eats them, like gas, bloating, like her GI tract
Yes.
is unhappy?
I want to say that, meaning that she did some sort of very complicated allergy testing where her blood was sent to America. She's done these things where it came back telling her not to eat these things. And I think she would get terrible stomach aches. Really, what I should do is call her up and get her on here with us. I think she would get really bad stomach aches and things when she would eat some of these things. So I think that recently it was like, well, she found histamine intolerance and maybe because she's tried parasites, yeast, molds, like all of these different things. And if you tell her to eat like this, she'll eat like this. Like she's not one who like, yeah, I'm eating like this, but really I'm sneaking Twinkies. Like she's not like
Okay,
that.
I understand. I think so. One of the things, first of all, I really feel for her because that's an awful situation to be in. And she's not alone. I mean, I have heard so many times from people who are dealing with this histamine intolerance, which ends up being like either histamine overload. If we go more serious, you're looking at MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome, and even more severe than that would be mastocytosis. So there is this increasing severity. So it can depend on where she falls in that category if this really is part of her problem. And one thing So this is, I definitely want to make sure to circle back on like why I asked you about the term
Yes.
allergy, because that is important here. Just as how I was like, I made the point to specifically explain what an intolerance is, because like I said, we shouldn't have these like, I feel like there's like leaky borders around what has happened with words these days. And they have meanings, and we really need to be clear. And I think well-intentioned people like ourselves who care so deeply about this one vessel that we have been given, this gift of taking care of it, we have been inundated with language that is not exact enough and creates confusions, because allergies, intolerances and sensitivities mean different things. And that is important in terms of clues. So my other grievance is that we've allowed people to think that if they just cut out more and more food, that that's where the healing happens. And I think that puts an unfair onus on people like you and me, who again, and your friend, who are well-intentioned, you want to do all the right things. It's like, goodness, it feels like this list, this tally list that you're never going to be able to get through. Like you're never going to be able to do enough to actually get to the end. And that makes me feel kind of sad. I think food is connection. It's nourishment. It's so, so deeply important. And so one of my goals when I work with clients is to get their diet as varied. I'm not saying like eat McDonald's. That's not the goal,
Right.
but the goal is, can we get you to be able to reintroduce foods that are not true IgE allergies? And so, yes, you can have lesser allergies that are not necessarily anaphylactic, certainly. And sometimes you can have allergies that do impact the GI tract and are considered like legitimate allergies. Then we have sensitivities where there's some level of reactivity within the GI tract. It's usually due to the fact that the proteins aren't getting broken down correctly. They sneak through the gut lining. So instead of it being like pushed up nice and tight, right, the cells butt up, there's this space. It's not a tight junction.
Right.
And those proteins that are partly undigested sneak into the body inappropriately. And your body's like, whoa, what is that? I don't recognize it. And it starts to attack that and creates all this inflammation. And so my goal is, how can we right some of these issues within digestion, absorption, the state of the barrier that is really, really crucial within the GI tract, so that eventually you could reintroduce those non-IgE allergy foods and enjoy them, be able to partake in them and not have this reaction. It can be really life-changing. I was gluten-free since 2008. I started reintroducing gluten about 2 years ago almost now, and actually make my own sourdough bread from whole wheat. It still freaks me out slightly that I am doing this, but I can tolerate it just fine. And I will tell you that being able to just eat a slice of bread, for people who probably eat it all the time, you're like, oh, whatever, bread. But I didn't have bread for like 13 years, maybe longer.
Wow.
And to be able
Wow.
to have a slice of real bread, not the gluten-free stuff. And I mean, I was even buying like $10 and $12 bags of gluten-free bread, trying to get the best. The consistency, the taste, to be able to eat with a person, with
Right.
other people, without having to feel like you for some reason just can't enjoy and partake in that experience, is so important. And those who have histamine issues really struggle because, like I said, there's this worsening scale, right? So we go from histamine intolerance to histamine overload to MCAS to mastocytosis. Some people will at least get a reduction in symptoms by this. And again, the diet looks different because it depends on how severely you might want to restrict histamine from food in order to manage. You're only going to manage. This is a Band-Aid for the time being to manage this issue. So some people might just be like, oh, well, I just have to avoid vinegar and kimchi and sauerkraut and cured meats and cheeses and those kind of things that are like very obvious high histamine foods, and like wine and beer, where there's some people who can't even eat leftovers because eating
Right.
the
So
smallest amount is so so bad. So it really depends on the severity. And I have actually worked with clients who were completely welted up with angioedema, chronic hives, and are also known as urticaria and dermatographia, where it did not matter how strict they were with their diet, they still had the problem. So they didn't even bother to do a low histamine diet because it didn't make a difference. And they at least wanted some normalcy in their life.
Okay, so let me back up for 1 second, just
Sure.
so people listening who aren't as well versed as either you or I might be. Let me just ask you, first of all, what would be signs and symptoms of a histamine intolerance? Let's just start with that.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's thinking I might have this, what might be some of the things they would see? Because now you're talking about really welted up skin. So give us some of those clues.
Yeah, so you can experience histamine intolerance in a number of different body systems. So for the skin manifestations, it would be urticaria or hives, and it's any type. It doesn't even matter if they told you it was like autoimmune chronic urticaria. It doesn't matter. I would honestly, they don't even know what that is. So that's why I said urticaria, period, hives, period. Dermatographia is where if you were to like take your nail and draw something on your arm, it will the pattern will welt up. You're literally, it's skin writing. That's what it's, right? Dermatographia.
So in other words, if you came and you just did this, you're going to end up with like I'm not in front of the camera, but like the whole thing is going to actually raise, welt up, swell a little bit, get red a little bit. Wow.
You could draw a happy face on somebody's back and it'll welt up.
Wow.
Happy.
My gosh.
If you wear anything tight that presses in, so like straps, your waistband, tight pants.
Wow.
I've had clients who can't wear yoga pants. They can't wear anything that's tight because that pressure destabilizes the mast cells and they have angioedema. So angioedema is more just general swelling. Like the tissue actually swells. Not like, it looks like a little, no, you have this like huge welt and it looks pretty awful and it usually is. So those are the most common. Now I will specifically tell you, if you have itchy eczema, please stop saying you have histamine intolerance. That's not true. So most eczema is not driven, the itch in eczema is not driven by histamine. And that was discovered at there was an itch laboratory at Johns Hopkins University. And I've actually had the doctor on my podcast where I met him at an event and saw him present. Now listen, I'm a clinical nutritionist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not I have to stay within my scope of practice, but there are certain observations that I had made. I was like, find that most eczema cases are actually histamine problems. There's something totally else. And he's like, the majority are not histamine driven. Itch can be driven by so many different things, and most of it's not histamine. So if you go on functional medicine websites, if you're listening to a functional medicine doctor, a practitioner, a health coach, and they're like, oh, you have eczema, you have a histamine problem, you should just stop following them because that is factually inaccurate. You can end up with itch because nerve endings, when you scratch your skin, you're mechanically actually destroying the skin barrier. The process of regrowing nerves is itchy. The fact that we know there's greater water loss or transepidermal water loss through the weakened skin barrier, that loss of water makes your skin itchy. There's also an interesting thing, which Dr. Sean Quatra is his name. He's now at the University of Maryland. The other thing he talked about, which is what was my feeling about this from having worked with clients, was that we have the vagus nerve that runs from our brain all the way down, innervated all throughout, plugged in essentially all throughout the GI tract. Well, it's picking up and sensing all of this discomfort and this inflammatory mess within the gut. It sends that signal back up to your brain, and your brain mistranslates the signal as itch, because itch and pain are on the same wavelength when it comes to nerves. And so that, to me, I was like, that makes a lot of sense because that's what we see. So I just want people to know that. You can't go, oh, I have eczema, oh, I'm itchy. That doesn't mean you have a histamine issue.
To me, I hear eczema and I'm like, gut health. And what were you saying histamine intolerance or overload is? Gut health. So meaning you got to start with the gut.
So I will say this. In terms of skin issue, if there are skin issues not pregnant, if there's skin issues present, there's usually a number of issues going on. Some feed in, like if usually there's a gut problem, not always, but you can't just deal with the gut problem. The gut issue creates a problem for your liver detox, so specifically phase 2 liver detox. And then we have external sources, and we do know this from research. So we have external sources of toxins and allergens and other things that contribute to this mess. So we do have to look both at the outside in and the inside out approach in order to really get better. I didn't know this early on when I had started working with skin cases and was just like, oh, it's a gut problem. And I could never figure out why we couldn't make a huge dent forward, and occasionally I would get somebody to a great spot, but it didn't make sense. And it was when I started to broaden that picture and realize like, oh, I need to see the whole system and where that problems are, and then where do we start to fill up as much of the low leaky buckets as possible to get the system like rebooted. That was when we really started to see improvements in things. But back to your question about symptoms as well. You can have diarrhea, like within the GI tract, you can have diarrhea, you can have, some people who have constipation, but usually it's more like loose stools. You'll feel like some people will have very visceral discomfort within their GI tract. I would also argue that like some people will end up with like heart palpitations. You can have blood pressure drops actually. So if anyone has POTS or you're hypermobile and you're like Ehlers-Danlos and whatnot, you're on the more severe usually end of like a mast cell issue because histamine gets released in a lot of these conditions. So that's really important to know. And so that's why it can affect the central nervous system. Some people will get headaches, migraines, you'll get flushing, you'll start to, like you said, produce mucus. You'll feel like very hot, your skin might start to burn and really itch. So, you can feel dizzy. It's all sorts of different issues. Most of my clients are struggling with chronic skin problems that a lot of times there's overlap to gut issues. But yeah, that's usually the most common. Sometimes people will just have like really severe reactions to things, but that's not quite as common, like where you like feel nauseous and you'll vomit and whatnot, but that's not a normal thing.
Okay, well, some of the signs and symptoms that you described are also some of the signs and symptoms of hormonal changes during perimenopause or menopause. And my understanding is there are things within estrogen and progesterone that can maybe mimic or increase issues with histamine. Could you explain a little bit about that? And the reason this is important is that we've done a lot of women's health issues, and there are a lot of people on hormone replacement therapy and things like that. And my understanding is estrogen can have an effect on histamine as well.
It can. So I'll just start with progesterone very quickly because that's a little bit easier to explain. The only reason that you would have an issue with progesterone causing rashes, and it's usually pretty easy to track, is that you can develop, and I'm so sorry to say this, and this rings a bell for anybody, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but it could be your progesterone, but we can develop an allergy to our own progesterone. And it's considered rare, but we don't know if it's rare because nobody really looks for it. It's hard to get tested. A lot of the ways that women have kind of figured it out is because they would track their cycle and when they would have an increase in these symptoms, and they would notice it would happen during their cycle when progesterone would spike. Now that becomes a little more complicated if you're taking progesterone every day as part of your hormone replacement therapy. However, you might look back and go, geez, all of a sudden I started taking this and now I notice my symptoms are way worse. It is, again, uncommon. I have read that you can get tested via your blood for a progesterone kind of, this is like an allergy. It's sometimes listed as like autoimmune progesterone hypersensitivity, I think is like one of the medical terms. But it's basically an allergy. So that's the deal with progesterone. And that is, again, not common. But how common, I don't want to say rare because again, we don't know if it's really rare
Right.
because we're not really looking for it. Also, if you've had a history of doing IVF, unfortunately, that can be one of the triggers to it. And it's, again, this is not to shame anybody who has ever chosen to go that route. It's just be aware that if you look back in your history, right, it's to help you try to pinpoint things. That can be an issue. And you can still be reactive to the form that's in birth control pills. Sometimes doctors will go, oh, well, because you're allergic to your own progesterone, we'll give you it in the form of birth
Fake
control
progesterone.
pills. The fake progesterone, you'll be fine. And that I've had clients where that did not help, unfortunately. The deal with estrogen is that estrogen increases our cellular sensitivity to histamine. So if you are already, if your bucket, right, your histamine cup is already pretty full, estrogen is going to make you more reactive to it from a cellular perspective. So one issue, and actually this ties back to the gut, is where we have a state of estrogen dominance. Estrogen is higher than progesterone, and this can happen because our liver is actually tasked with regulating the amount of estrogen in the body. So when there's too much, it'll turn it off and it'll send it through bile. And then when you eat, the gallbladder squeezes out the bile, and it's the estrogen, this deactivated form, slowly makes its way down your gut to be pooped out. That's how we get it out of our system. The problem, and what this has to do with the gut, is that there are certain types of bacteria called gram-negative bacteria. So like our commensal E. coli it's a type of gram-negative bacteria that has an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. It turns the deactivated estrogen back on, and that form of reactivated estrogen is actually a free radical form of estrogen. And then because it's now turned on, we reabsorb it. So you can't get it out of your system. It's hijacked. One would say, oh, well, this is a hormone problem. I would argue it's a gut problem. And the only way to really fix it is by addressing the gut imbalances that are creating this hijack. So if we can do whatever we can to kind of snatch on or bind to that
Right.
estrogen as it's coming down and to get it shuttled out before it gets turned back on, that would be like the Band-Aid in the meantime. But estrogen will so if you noticed your symptoms got a lot worse going on HRT, that might be a sign that there is a problem. And it may be the hormones themselves, but it might not be. And just for everybody thinking, what about testosterone? Testosterone is not really associated with this. Testosterone is an issue more for like acne, but it's not for histamine intolerance.
So if somebody's on HRT though, and it's creating problems for them, it sounds like if you would clean up your gut health, then hopefully you would then be able to go back on to the HRT.
That would be
That really, it's not the HRT. The HRT is just a problem because your gut is unhealthy in many cases, not every case.
That would be the hope. Obviously, every case is different, but that would be the hope. And the only way is to try it. And you'd have to work with, obviously, at least, I don't know how it is in Israel, but here in the US, we have to work with a doctor around HRT.
Yeah, no, we have to do that here too. Okay, so then let me ask you two things. One is we talked a lot about the liver helping detoxify things. What about trying a liver detox? Like, would that help people?
No.
No. Okay.
No. Oh, no.
Okay.
So I mentioned, this is important. I mentioned about phase 2 liver detox. There's actually I consider three different phases of liver detox. Phase 2 is highly dependent on having specific nutrients to run. So I think we're of the same age relatively, so you'll know.
I'm older,
Maybe
yes.
a lot of your listeners will remember this. Do you remember the I Love Lucy episode where Lucy and Ethel were in the chocolate factory wrapping the bonbons? Do you remember that?
I think I do. I don't know how you remember that because I Love Lucy was before my time and I'm more than 10 years older than you. So, but okay.
I used to
It's
watch
classic.
my great aunt's house. That's what they used to watch. So I remember that, and I'm very much a visual learner. So I try when I explain things that are complicated to give good visuals that people can understand. And so for those who might not quite remember this, these two ladies are standing there, the boss lady's like, you have to wrap every bonbon. And if there's any bonbons that make it down the line that aren't wrapped, you're fired. And so Ethel and Lucy are standing by the conveyor belt and they're wrapping the bonbons coming out, but the conveyor belt starts to speed up and
I
more
remember
and
this
more
episode.
start coming out and they can't keep up. And now they're like putting them in their blouse, up in their hat,
They're
in their
eating
mouth.
them. Weren't they eating them?
Right.
Yeah.
They're trying because they said they can't have any bonbons that were not wrapped make it to the end of the line. And so, okay, so the reason that I think this is such a great example is because the wrappers are these nutrients. And I think in our heads, we like to think that our body makes all the nutrients that we could ever need. That is not true. We are a nutrient consumption factory, not a production factory. We do make some things from other things, but we don't make everything. And we also have to take into account the load. So in this particular instance, the conveyor belt sped up. There's more and more and more and more bonbons. So if we're saying, just for example's sake, that, and this one pathway, it's called the glycine cleavage system, but we'll just call it the glycine pathway for short. Glycine is an amino acid. We need the glycine amino acid to convert something to something else in order to be able to have it exit the body. So let's say we have 100 wrappers of glycine. What happens if between everything coming down from phase 1, which also has to go through phase 2, and then there's other things specifically from the gut that come in and jump the line into phase 2 liver detox that also have to be detoxified? What if you've got 250 coming down phase 1 and 300 from the gut? What do you do with your 100 wrappers? It's not like the body just starts stealing other amino acids in its place. So that's the problem. And that's what we don't account for is this massive burden from the GI tract. And just so you know, if you decide to start addressing the problems, let's say you do a candida cleanse or a parasite cleanse or a gut protocol and you start killing things, guess what? The load increases even more. So a cleanse isn't going to fix this. This is a problem of deficiency. So it means you have to replete the nutrient wells so that the liver can do what it's meant to do. One of the problems I have with liver detoxes is a lot of times they push phase 1 even faster. Like I said, everything that goes through phase 1 has to go through phase 2. So if you speed, right? If the conveyor belt speeds up, we've created the I Love Lucy problem.
That was a great example. And that works so well for me because I like the visuals also.
Right. And it's a little silly. It works. So,
right, but it works, but it makes you really understand it. Mm-hmm. I tend to use these type of examples myself when I'm explaining something that I'm going to re-mention that you mentioned in a minute. Yeah. But I do want to ask you then, first of all, what about taking antihistamines?
So antihistamines may be a necessary part of this process in the beginning if you're really struggling, because you have to consider your quality of life. If you're not able to show up and I'm sorry, you don't get that time back. I'm not sure. I get sometimes people are like, I want to do this 100% naturally. And listen, everyone has the right to choose what is best for you. I would never assume nor put my belief system on anyone else's. I'm here to support someone to make the best possible decision for themselves. But guess what? This is a reality that we all have to face. We're all going to die. So we've got a limited amount of time and none of us know how much time that is. B, you don't get that time back. So if you spend the next 2 years in bed, not able to go to your kids' soccer games, not able to be a spouse, not able to go to work, not able to do these things because you really want to muscle through in a certain way, because in your head, not doing it that way is a perceived failure. What happens to those relationships? What happens to all that stuff in the meantime? You don't get a do-over. You don't get to go back. You've lost that time in life. So again, I've worked with over 1,000 clients and I've just seen where people who've gotten really entrenched in this idea, this black and white thinking of this is the good way, this is the right way versus this is the bad way. This is failure. If I have to even reach for, one antihistamine a day, I'm a bad person. Oh, if I choose this medication, I'm a bad person. Like, we have to get the moral judgment out of this whole conversation, because at the end of the day, you don't get the time back. You don't get a prize. You get nothing. accept the loss. So my preference would be, look, try to find a way to live the best quality of life possible. And if you're really committed to taking care of and working and supporting your body, at the same time, you do the work to get it out of that, because you can slowly get yourself off of antihistamines. And yes, there are some older antihistamines like Benadryl and such can impact your brain and may, from research, be more associated with like Alzheimer's, dementia, and some of these other issues. I will be very clear and cautious. Be careful with Montelukast, also known as Singulair, because some people will develop significant and severe mood changes and personality changes from being on it. And that's well noted. There's even an FDA in the United States, was an FDA warning about that. Some of the other ones like Zyrtec and whatnot don't seem to carry as much of an issue, but there can be a wean-off period where you can you're on Zyrtec for a really long time and you try to get off of it and you can end up being really itchy and all sorts of things. There's a pro and a con to everything. But I just think at the end of the day, I don't want you to miss out on your kid's life. I don't want you to miss out on mom's birthday. I don't want you to miss out and go, oh shoot, this person that I wanted to like go to dinner with died, and now I don't have that experience. I mean, I deeply value relationships. I deeply value community. And I think that that's a necessary part of this conversation that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge, because they're so entrenched in, you have to do it this one way. This is your life. You can find a way to blend it. And I can tell you for a fact, you can do the conventional stuff and the integrative stuff at the same time.
Yes. I will say it's the same as that if, somebody has severe depression, yes, they probably need their gut health. They need an overhaul, but you're not going to not deny them medication while you're giving them the gut overhaul, because you've got to do something to stabilize them. If somebody's
correct,
I don't know, schizophrenic or whatever, like, yes, you've got to focus on the gut health, but you have to at the same time treat what's going on. So what you're saying about the antihistamine makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
But
so one of the clients that I worked with, she was on 8 doses. This is how bad she was. She was on 8 doses of antihistamines and Xolair. It's like a biologic shot every 2 weeks when she started. She's off all of that. It took us about 7 months, but she has not needed it in the last year and a half. She's completely free.
That's interesting, because that's exactly what I was about to ask you, is that, you have people who suffer terribly from seasonal allergies. And now, based on what you said, it's making me think that like a seasonal allergy really starts with gut balance. And are they more likely to be susceptible to these seasonal allergies if their gut is unhealthy? And is that why, right? We all know that like people tend to become more allergic as they age. Well, if you've got a not so healthy gut when you're 8 versus when you're 60, it's built up over so much time that your allergies are going to get worse and worse and worse. But maybe that's because your gut is more and more and more unhealthy if you're not changing it.
Possible. I don't know that I have. So I'll be entirely transparent. I don't have any proof that that's the case. What I've seen clinically is that some people will notice an improvement in their allergy tolerance, like people who have tons of allergies to, ragweed, birch, all sorts of stuff. Anything, pollen flying around, they're like a mess and they have to stay indoors. So there are people who have noticed a good improvement. They might not be 100% better, but a good like improvement in tolerance. I think there's some natural things that you can do to also help bolster that. And some different, interventions that you can do. I don't know. There's the oral, the immunotherapy that you can do with allergists that sometimes can build up your level of tolerance. That is a long-term commitment. And my understanding of it is it works better in children than it does in adults. The thing that we don't want to do, and this is sort of bouncing back to our initial kind of conversation about like what are high histamine foods and the diet, and your friend who was like, I'll do anything. You tell me to stop eating this, I'll stop eating it. I think we have to be careful as adults, because it is possible if you take out too much food, especially things that are one of the top 9 allergens, you can actually cause your body to develop an like an anaphylactic IgE allergy to that is permanent. So once you develop those as an adult, they're not likely going away. And we have seen this a lot because well-meaning, actually, have only been women so far that I've seen this happen to. I'm not saying it can't happen to men. I just haven't worked with a man that this has happened to. But one woman had eczema. She read online on Facebook that eggs were a trigger, which is not true. And so she cut out eggs. Well, she started working with us. We're making good progress. I'm like, hey, let's see if we could, reintroduce some eggs. Let's bake it into something and see if you can tolerate it. She sent me a photo. I'm like, oh, that looks like an allergic reaction. You need to call an allergist. Do you have Benadryl or whatever? Turns out she developed an anaphylactic egg allergy. She can't even She can't even have cooked eggs. It baked into something. It is permanent, unfortunately. And the question she asked me was, did I do this to myself? And I was like, I'm really sorry. You know better, you do better. We can't go back and like sit with this because you're just going to beat yourself up. We had another client who had taken out all dairy because she was told that dairy was really bad, like all dairy, even goat dairy, everything out. She now has such a severe dairy allergy. She can't have goat. She can't have sheep. She can't have other forms of dairy as a result. She never had an allergy before. She didn't have any symptoms that were even indicative of a slight allergy. Nothing. So Be very careful. This is a phenomenon that's been studied in children because it can happen in young children. It has not been studied in adults, but it has been discussed at different events and practitioner professional trainings that I've been at and conferences. So there's no data on who this would impact, but it usually seems like if you take something out fully for about a year and this is where it's like, I'm really careful about just flippantly suggesting somebody take something out because there's a possible problem down the road that could happen to you. And I don't want that to be you. If you try to reintroduce it after a year, it's possible. That seems to be the time frame where the immune system is like, what's that? I don't know what that is. I need to attack that. And you have a problem. So just be careful before you randomly go online and take somebody's advice to do a diet or take out all this food. It might not be, I can't even have it. It's like you literally can't be exposed to that. Having an allergy is a way different problem than just trying to avoid it because you're sensitive to it.
So I want to tell you that when you said you don't have scientific proof, I was going to tell you we can put that on what I like to call Dara's list of things that she believes are true that one day research will prove. So one of the things is exactly what you said. When my daughter, who is, God willing, actually getting married next week, by the time this comes out, she will be married. But when she was a baby, we moved back to the United States. She was 4 weeks old. And I remember going into the pediatrician office, and on the end of our first visit, they said, okay, and I was nursing her. So they're like, okay, remember, like, you shouldn't eat peanuts and you shouldn't eat this. And I was like, what? Like, yeah, it could get passed through the breast milk to the baby. You should avoid peanuts. And I looked the doctor in the face and I said, I just want you to know that one day research is going to prove that the reason so many of these U.S. kids have peanut allergies is because you don't expose them to peanuts. I said, we give babies Bamba when they're 5 months old in Israel. And no one in Israel has a peanut allergy. And sure enough, research proved that. And so I don't want to spend too much time on it because I really don't want to get away from this and I don't want to keep you on for too much longer. But childhood allergies, right? Like I'm thinking of my daughter-in-law's sister who has a tremendous amount of food allergies. And thank God, actually, within the past few years, some of the things that she was highly, highly allergic to when she was younger, like I think dairy and eggs, are things that she was then able to actually start eating. So how does a childhood allergy fit in with this idea of histamine intolerance? And I assume it's not histamine intolerance. It's a true allergy like you were talking about. And it's an appropriate histamine reaction.
Correct.
Because it's...
Well, so with children, and I'll just be very transparent. I don't work with kids, but I've interviewed enough experts on allergies that at least I can intelligently regurgitate what I know from them. And so what I do know is that now we actually know through research that it's inappropriate exposure oftentimes to the allergen a lot of times on the face. So think about it. When you have a kid, right? They're trying to eat, they smear it on their face. And where does eczema usually show up? On the cheeks. So you get up with a broken skin barrier on the face. The allergen, the food, is being introduced to the immune system in an inappropriate way. It's going through a barrier it's not supposed to go through. That is one way they believe now that kids are actually ending up with all these allergies, is through the skin barrier.
Wow. So you're saying if it went through their digestive tract, and that's why they're telling you now to let babies lick things when they're 4 months, 5 months old, even, younger.
Because this is the correct route of introduction. That's how our immune system is meant to interact with food, not through the skin. So I don't work with babies or kids, but one of my colleagues does. And she used to be like, my gosh, only natural products. If we could do like avocado oil, right? Or one of these things, it's natural. We cook with it, we eat with it. And now she's really careful. She's like, I don't like a lot of times them using food-based products on like especially young babies' skin, because if their barrier is compromised, and they work with her because the kid has eczema and it's really bad, you potentially trigger a food allergy. And it's like,
it's amazing.
It's not to say, oh, the stuff filled with paraffins and all this other stuff is better for you. This is not again, not black and white. But if you trigger a food allergy that's anaphylaxis, we gotta weigh the consequences. And there's some kids that like can't even be in the room with somebody that was to open a bag of peanuts or nuts or sesame.
Airborne allergies, and you're saying that's skin or correct. I guess like nasal passage also if they're smelling it.
Sure.
Okay.
So if you develop the allergy as an adult, that is still at this point, every allergist I've talked to has said, unfortunately at this point, it's likely permanent. If you have it as a child, there's a good chance you'll outgrow it as you get into like your teenage years. But that's why I said we got to be careful, because us adults love to go, I'm going to do this for myself. I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And listen, if that's what you want to do, you do you. But I would just hate to see you go, oh God, like to not be able to even eat any amount of baked egg into say a cake. That means you can't have any, that means from here on out, if every birthday cake and every celebration cake has eggs in it, you can't have it because you literally have to carry an EpiPen. So, I mean, this is a big deal. And what's happening with the kids, that is a histamine response, but it's not the same as histamine intolerance, mastocytosis, MCAS, that kind of stuff. It's a different part of it. And the allergy piece, this is actually also might be helpful. We do look at what's happening with somebody from an allergic perspective. So if a client comes in and says, hey, I have a really bad ragweed allergy, a lot of people don't know, and this goes back to your question about why I don't like liver detoxes. A lot of liver detox herbs are ragweed family herbs.
Wow.
So milk thistle, dandelion root, you're literally taking large amounts of a ragweed that you are allergic to.
Right.
Stevia is also in that family as well.
That's interesting. Wow.
We care about what your pollen allergies are because that can translate to some potential cross-reactivity in food. So again, it is, the gut piece is really fascinating to me because I love to nerd out on gut issues, and I can talk about that for hours because it is a big component to it. But it is a multifaceted problem. And I think that's where if we get too siloed into thinking it's just this one thing, that's where we might not feel better. But the gut piece is huge. It is huge. I don't want to deny that.
It sounds to me, though, what you're really saying is if somebody's listening to this is kind of what it sounds like, because I want to leave people with a concise, that if you think you might have histamine intolerance, it's not that you wouldn't consider it histamine intolerance, but it's sort of like if you haven't cleaned up your gut, if you're still, I don't know, buying packaged cereal and you're eating things that come out of packages and processed food and bad oils and all of these things, like you don't really need to worry about whether or not it's histamine intolerance or insulin resistance or any of these things. You've got to clean up your gut health first. And then you can kind of weed out and narrow down whether this could really truly be a histamine intolerance problem. Because if it is truly histamine intolerance now, Can you give us a list? You've mentioned some of the foods, but just sort of give us a list of the foods that you would need to avoid if it is truly histamine intolerance.
I mean, that's an extensive list that probably
Okay.
your listeners would be better off looking up online. I
It's
can
true.
just
You
tell
can,
you that
guys can chat GPT it.
yeah,
But a
yeah, and I
lot of
mean
it is things that are healthy. That's what's
they
interesting.
are like even collagen, bone
Right.
broth, protein powders, even most vegan ones as well, the plant-based ones. And like I said, in the worst case scenario, leftovers are off the table
Right.
if you're
And
really getting
that
that
to
reaction.
me, and I will tell you this because, like I did say back at the beginning, I know that according to my DNA, I don't break it down well or process it well or whatever it is. If I eat leftovers that are too old, not bad, but let's say I'm eating chicken that's 4 days old, I'll get heartburn. And I don't ever get heartburn.
Mm,
I'm a really good breather. We're not going to go into breathing here, but like I don't ever get heartburn. And the only time I ever have gotten it is if I notice it'll be like I ate chicken that was too old or meat that was like a few days old. And to me, I think that that's my gut saying that it wasn't for me. It wasn't good for me
yeah.
or something.
Well, I do think, yes, clean up the diet. I think that's always an important first step. The other thing to know about a low histamine diet, it's not going to fix the problem. Again, it's a band-aid. So then the question is, well, why is this happening? That's where we want to start digging into what's happening throughout the GI tract, looking at gut function. So how do we digest things? How do we absorb things? What's happening with elimination? And then what's living there? And what's living in places where it shouldn't be? What shouldn't be living in the body? We can have all sorts of infections that range from the bacteria like H. pylori, and there's other bacteria that can show up that produce a ton of histamine. Then we have candida overgrowth that can also trigger histamine issues. Different types of parasites have different reactions on the body. Certain types like helminths or worms play a lot on that allergic side of the immune system. And just to also, an important thing to know is that stool testing is not great even today. It is highly imperfect. It misses a lot of things. So you can't trust just because it says there's no candida does not mean you can trust that. Just because it says there's no parasites, you cannot trust that. With histamine overload, you really have to look at a variety of different testing. You have to look at the full picture. You have to look at the case history, and you have to make decisions from there. And some of it may be like, well, we suspect this is a problem, so we're going to proceed forward because nothing else is helping. So let's give this a shot. So it is a bit more complicated, but there is hope. And I think I just want to leave everyone with that there is truly hope here. You don't have to be stuck with this for life. I just think get curious. Ask, why is this happening? You just didn't suddenly flip a switch and all of a sudden you're having these issues. There's a reason why. It doesn't mean that yesterday you ate something and now suddenly you have a problem. That can happen. But a lot of times these might be exposures from 15, 20 years ago that at the time your immune system could manage. But with that increasing number of organisms, with shifts within the gut, maybe you got food poisoning a number of times, maybe different stressors, all sorts of things create an environment that now your immune system is like, whoa, I can't handle this anymore. And now you have symptoms. And your body is just asking you for help. That's what the symptoms are, as annoying and awful as they may be. It's a cry for help.
Okay, two last quick questions before I ask you my final question.
Sure.
Number one is, does stress and lack of sleep and things like that make this problem worse?
Absolutely, because we need to reboot. It's another input, and stress might not necessarily be, goodness, like I used to live in New York City and it was so stressful hearing all the noise, all the banging and sirens and goofy people on the sidewalk who you're like, I don't know, that person looks a little sketchy. It's not just that. It could also be the stressors happening internally because the gut issues, the nutrient deficiencies, all of that is stress. But this is the stress you can't walk away from. And I would argue the things that you feed yourself that are not physical food, like if you're watching a lot of news or social media and things like that, and you don't have you're really struggling with the resilience to be able to handle just be careful the amount of negativity that it's really easy just to go down that rabbit hole these days. It has become so easy. And your system, you might think, I feel fine, but that is a load. That's an input. It's the same as if you ate cheeseburgers all day from McDonald's.
Right.
Eventually it's going to catch up with you. And I think it's
Right.
all of these different things coming in that create an environment where not just on a physical level, but from an energetic and I would even argue that like a spiritual, mental, emotional side of things, we become really imbalanced. And for those who just want to be like, oh, I'm a physical body. This is all there is. That's cool. I think I've really had a broadening in the last few years of watching different things happen to different people, looking at so many different clients. And I think as you go further along in your journey, you start to see things that science can't explain. And no amount of studies is going to change your behavior unless you choose to change what shapes you in life. Is life shaping you in a good way, or are you allowing it to deform you? And that's a question I've been like really sitting with over the last few months. And it's a question that's hard. It can be challenging and confronting, but I think it can't just be like, oh my gosh, what am I eating? It's also like, what am I choosing to include in my day?
That makes a lot of sense to me because I believe that your environment, your where you are mentally and how you let things affect you has such an effect on your health. And that is one of my things on Dara's list of things that she believes one day research will prove. That really research is showing now that all of these things are key components in health. And I think that what you said is so, so important. And I mean, it sounds like you partially answered my question about what does spirituality mean to you. But
Mm,
if you want to expound more on that, it sounded like
sure.
you started to go down the spirituality road there.
Yeah, I will say that. So it was interesting before this. I looked up what the word spirituality meant because I was like, I think I know what it means, but do I know what it means? So I
Right.
looked
No, I
that
think
up.
that's great.
And then I was like, well, what is faith versus spirituality? What is religion versus spirituality and faith? Because I really wanted to be able to understand where I fit into all of that rather than just giving you some, knee-jerk reaction response. And so I think in general, what it was saying is that everybody has some level of spirituality because it's how you relate to something greater than yourself. And then the
Yeah.
faith is the belief in something specific. And then religion is like the kind of man-made thing, container that we may or may not choose to be in. I would say that spirituality in the last 2 years has become really important to me. Um, I actually got baptized last week. So
Wow.
that was a big deal.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I
Wow.
was I was baptized as a baby in the Roman Catholic Church, but I felt like this was me choosing. Me choosing feels different. And I listen, I feel like wherever you are in your journey is where you're meant to be. But if you're not growing from that experience, then maybe there's something else out there for you. I have learned so much about, and I think this goes back to what we just said about the idea that the things that shape you in life have an impact. I really do truly believe that stories we tell ourselves are transmitted to ourselves. So if you have a belief about that you are not worthy of love, that you are, you have shame, you have all of these different things that you're carrying around that you're not worthy of being forgived or whatever. I think that translates out to your cells, and that can also set the stage where sometimes you can't follow through in taking action on things because you don't believe you're worthy of it, right? We can have all of the right steps in front of us, the best plan, but you can't seem to make it happen. So I realized that there's so much wisdom around us, there's so much beauty, and there's so much mystery. And um, I don't know, it's changed me in a way to be able to not just empathize with clients. Cause I never had hives, I didn't have urticaria, but I did have eczema. I had hidradenitis suppurativa as well, which is a very different skin condition. And so I have a lot of empathy for skin clients, but I think what I've learned to really have empathy for is the human condition of what happens to people on their journey and being there to hold a space for them that maybe they can't hold for themselves and helping them make choices that on a higher level will hopefully transmit down to them in whatever way is necessary. And you know, my belief is my belief. And I just, it's really changed me. It's changed the way I see the world. And I'm so grateful for it. I would never go back. I would never choose to unsee what I believe to be true. So,
Well, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I love that. And let me ask you, where can people find you? What's the best place for people to find you? And do you
well,
see people remotely?
yes, I work with clients all over the world, actually.
Good to
So
know.
we have a virtual practice, a team of practitioners. So they can find me at, well, I have my podcast, The Healthy Skin Show, which has over 400 episodes. That's available on YouTube and all the podcasting
Amazing.
platforms.
I'm going to
I'm
link
also,
it. I'm definitely going to
okay,
link
I'm
it.
also on Instagram. So it's just at my name, at Jennifer Fugo. And then if you go to, this is the easier way to find me, healthyskinshow.com, that'll get you to my website. And there, if you're interested in learning more about working with us and our method and everything, you can go through that and find that. But yeah, we work with clients all over the world. And so I am deeply curious. I love solving puzzles and playing the what if game and researching and whatnot. And so I love what we do, and I am so deeply honored to be on somebody's journey with them, helping to support them. And that's why I just, for anybody listening to this, regardless of where you are, just know that I do believe that healing is possible for you. I don't know what that version is going to look like, but don't ever give up. Don't ever give in. Don't believe that you are somehow damned to be in this horrible situation. Keep looking for answers. Be persistent, just like you would for your own child. You're worth it.
Wow. I love that. And I'm going to tell my friend, I'm going to give her your information so that she can get in touch, because I think it might be a good, sounds like would be a great fit for her. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you for having me.
Hey guys, I just wanted to jump on here quickly and remind you of the incredible health benefits of hydrogen water. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the episode of a few weeks ago, I will link it in the show notes. But one of the things that we talk about on every single episode is systemic inflammation and how that is the root cause of most disease, of a lot of mental health issues. And hydrogen water is a very easy and inexpensive way to try and fight this. So if you'd like to get your own bottle, I'll put a link in the show notes to the website for Echo. Using code Holy Health will get you an extra discount. Now until the end of the year, they're having incredible sales. So you may want to try it. Hey everyone, welcome back. I am so excited to be here once again with my friend, our friend, wonderful Torah educator, Edan. And I want to wish Edan publicly a Mazal Tov. She is engaged. And that's from all of us. But I'm really excited that she agreed to come on and do this today. And so, Edan, take it away. What do you think? Histamine intolerance, histamine.
I love
What
it.
does the Torah have to say about this?
The Torah has to say something about everything, so that's the beautiful part. The Torah is the blueprint of the world, so everything that exists is hidden in the roadmap that is the Torah. So, of course, let's dive into it, which is so lovely and really amazing, and always an incredible opportunity to discover. So, histamine, I've always heard of histamine because allergy season rolls around, and I'm taking antihistamine pills like through, like clockwork. And so it's interesting to think about that, of how something can be so consistent in your life that you don't even realize that it's really a big part of our lives, histamine, and what does that mean, and what does that apply to us? And so what I thought was interesting on some research, and I'm sure it's mentioned in the podcast, is that histamine and the histamine intolerance, which we'll get to, is an external reaction to an internal reality. And this is essentially what the spiritual and physical world dance is that there's always something on the outside that reflects something on the inside. There's a beautiful quote by Shlomo Karlibach, who says that if you walk down the street and you see someone and you say like, oh, they're so ugly, Gewalt, are you ugly? Or if you walk down the street and you see, wow, that person is so beautiful, Gewalt, are you beautiful, right? So we don't see the world the way it is, we see the world that we are. That's a core Torah value. The way that we experience the physical world can really be a reflection of our spiritual identity and our spiritual reality. And there's even different perspectives and thoughts on this, specifically from 2 weeks ago, I believe, the Parsha, speaking about the relationship between Esav and Yaakov. Saying, what is this hatred? What is this kind of like tension between the brothers? And the commentary was going in to say that it's revealing the relationship that we have, that Esav hates Yaakov, but Yaakov also has a disdain towards Esav. So sometimes we think it's coming from one source, but it's really two-sided. There's really a dance between the internal and the external, something that's a little bit more obvious and something that is hidden. So with the histamine working of retracting or defending the body against certain allergens or certain chemicals coming into the body and how the body reacts to it, it's a really good sign for us to understand how we take in different spiritual and emotional and really holistic experiences. And specifically, I think it's interesting, the process was that it's through the senses, the neural, like our brain takes it in first, sends it to the stomach, to my understanding, and throughout the body. And I think that this actually happens to relate to today's Daily Tanya. Because of course, Torah is everywhere. But following the process from top down. Right, like it's coming in through the brain and the body is processing it, and it goes internally all around. And the Daily Tanya of today, it's Perek Chet, I believe, speaks about the importance of a leader, the importance of a spiritual and specifically a religious leader in the time of Tefillah, and how the Alter Rebbe writes about this kind of internal conflict of a community rejecting a certain Shilach Tzibor, a person who's going up to represent the community in prayer, to be the Chazan, the leader. And the conflict is that the people are saying he's taking too long. He's meditating in his davening. It's way too long. We gotta go. Kids have school. I gotta go to my work, whatever it is. And the Alter Rebbe says, but the representative is the most important. This is the prime time of connection, so we can't really rush that. So it matters who our leaders are, and if we understand that it trickles down, so how do we affect our community, right? Like, how can I be a leader, and how can I affect my community in that way, and how do our current leaders affect our community? So that's just an important point to think about. And it's interesting also in the terms of health and bodily health. Actually, in the Daily Tanya, it says that it's one of the core values of Judaism, and it says there's a kind of midah keneged midah, or segula, you could say, or an intention that having a long davening, a focused davening, can be correlated to longevity, to orach yamim, a long life. So taking the time in tefillah, right? Because it makes sense. If you take a second to recognize where your life comes from, then you have a deeper appreciation, a heightened sense of self, and that of course affects the body for the better. Which kind of brings us to the intolerance, which was really interesting because it's almost like an opposite reality as well. This contrast between histamine being a working force in the body and a chemical and something that can work for our favor to defend us, but then the histamine intolerance, where there's like a fungal, there's something that's rotting, and it's almost like life and death, right? And both of them have a tie together through this reality. And I think if anything, it represents the power of equal potential, how something can exist in the good just as much as it can consist in the bad, as we see that in our midot, our character traits. Anger can have the most incredible passion and conviction, and groundedness in life, and it can also lead to the most destructive and the most isolating. So how we use our character traits and how it can be tolerance and intolerance in our life, and how it can manifest. And again, it brings me back to the Parsha as well. This is actually from a few weeks ago as well, Parsha Toldot, but this same kind of story of following the brotherhood of Yaakov and Esav, how Rashi says that Yaakov and Esav were exactly the same, which kind of shatters the impression we have as kids, where we think of Esav as this redhead, angry, rugged man, and Yaakov is a sweet yeshiva bacher. And the commentaries explain that no, they actually both looked very put together. They both looked the same, and it was very hard to differentiate. Same thing also we were talking about before, of the internal versus the external, and how they do have a relationship. And so the external really comes to fruition with Esav being represented as who he is when his internal comes out. Rashi says that it was their bar mitzvah. That's when you were able to tell the difference between Yaakov and Esav. And in Judaism, that is when it becomes your choice. It becomes who you are. Do you want to be the same on the inside as you are on the outside, and vice versa, right? How you want to represent yourself in this world. Is it going to be something that is aligned to Torah values, or is it going to be something that's aligned to outside values? And to really live with yourself in that way, and to represent yourself in that way. And so the same way that we see histamines working in the body and outside the body and all these different trajectories, I think that it's really valuable to take stock of that and to actually recognize, wait a minute, how does my internal represent through my external? And we see a myriad of examples through Tanakh of equal potential, right? We have Moshe and Korach. Moshe and Korach are of the same status, but when the ego comes into play, you have Korach, who is declaring that he has every right and he should be a leader, and Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the humblest of all. And so understanding that we really see the world in the way that we are, and the dance between those two can completely shatter and resurrect at the same time our relationship with each other, with God, and ultimately with ourselves. And so I think that's a deep kavanah to kind of bring in through this health discovery and question and discourse. So I appreciate mamash learning about it and growing with it. B'ezrat Hashem, we should have the zechut to realign with our higher self and see that manifest.
Thank you so much. As always, no matter what you do, I always love it. It always resonates with me, and this was no exception. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. Please seek guidance from a trusted healthcare professional. By listening to this podcast, you release Holy Health and all of its guests from all liability. I'd like to thank Yakir Abelow for editing this podcast.